And it may sound selfish, and it may sound a lot of things, but you know what? Go screw yourself.
You're listening to Unscripted with Mike and Chris, brutally honest sports talk. And now, here is Mike Jansen.
You know, it's been so long since Chris and I have gotten together. The last episode that Chris posted was back on July the 28th, episode 535. It was entitled Hello. No, it's not Lionel Richie's song. It was, I don't even know what we were talking about, but that was the last episode that Chris posted, again, back on July 28th. And as we sit here and welcome you to this 535th episode, it is Sunday the 5th. 6th. See?
You were talking about Christian Yelich, by the way. That's what you were talking about.
Christian Yelich. That's right. Christian Yelich. Very good. Christian Yelich. The no longer all-star right fielder of the Milwaukee Brewers, who are 2 games below 500 as we say hello and say hello. And it's been a while. I've got to get my lips working.
Wake
again.
up, Mike.
Yeah. Well, again, you know, and you know, as we've started this video component 6 weeks ago or whenever it was, we always started with headlines. So I have a headline. Mikey finally got a job. And thankful to Chris for his cooperation and his flexibility. I have been very, very busy, as Chris is every day. But Chris has been working the last 3 years. Old Mikey here hasn't been working much the last 3 years. And I will be traveling a lot with this group. It's a bit of a trip just to get out to this job. But I'm very appreciative and very thankful for everybody at Porchlight Developments. Free plug there. Maybe I can get them to be an advertiser on Unscripted. But a lot has changed. Chris and I both took some holidays. We did put my father virtually, if you will, in the ground twice, back on August the 8th and August the 12th. Did have a formal ceremony. My sister had a formal ceremony for him in her church in the Lake Tahoe area. So we finally got that behind us. And thanks to everybody for your kind words and your well wishes. And it's been an unbelievable, you know, this year started obviously on a really bad. It sucked. It has sucked since January 1st, let's be honest. And it was the same day that the Packers got blown out in the NFC Championship game in Santa Clara, California against 49ers. That was the day that my basement blew up with the water main break. That was January. Took until almost the end of February to get the house fixed. Then my father passes in April, and we've been going through all of that. And just along the way, just to spice things up again a little bit, we've got to throw in a worldwide pandemic. And then we have to throw in a little bit of a racial injustice and Black Lives Matter and everything else. I mean, Jesus, if we could just skip to January 1st of 2021 right now, I'd be all for it. I think a lot of people would join me in that. 2020 has sucked. There isn't even a nice spin to put about it. 2020 has sucked. And it continues to amaze me, everything that we have been through this year as a society, both, you know, collectively and individually. This has just been bullshit this whole year. And I am really looking forward to 2021. But again, some positives, obviously, in an economy that is in the toilet in Western Canada. Thank you to our Lord and worship, Justin. I always want to say, who's the little singer from Ottawa that made his name on YouTube? I always want to call him Justin Bieber, but it's Justin Trudeau, our prime minister in this great country, but he's a limp dick. As bad as this economy is, and it obviously hasn't been helped with coronavirus, Mikey breaks through and finds a job. Again, small miracle. The best news of 2020 by far. But this has been an unbelievably unique year, and we'll get to some of that. But I do want to stay on a format I want to get my lips working again. I want to get my voice working again. So we've got some headlines to address. And I guess the biggest one is that I'm taking this by the Green Bay Packers, because Chris and I have discussed this the last 3 Septembers. And I guess we have to say this is our season opener of our 4th season.
It is. Yeah, this is actually our 4th September, technically.
Right, 4th. But the last 3, remember 3 years ago, supposedly it was the Packers' 100th season.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 years ago was the NFL's 100th season. And then last year, for some reason, inexplicably, it was the 100th season again, because they put the Thursday night extravaganza with Packers-Bears, and obviously neither one of them the year previously had won the Super Bowl. So I'm going as the 102nd NFL season. I'm probably wrong. I don't give a shit. The 102nd NFL season starts on Thursday night. I'm very excited to see the defending world's Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. Unfortunately, and I said this when the schedule came out, and I remember it because I was with you and we were at your house and we were on Unscripted. I think they could have come up with a better playmate than the Houston Texans. Even though the Texans made news today or yesterday by signing their franchise quarterback Deshaun Watson to a $160 million contract for 4 years, a 4-year extension, $40 million a year per, and that's great. You know, you should never really feel sorry for a guy that just signed a $160 million contract extension, but I do feel a little bit sorry for him because he's stuck with butt chin for the next 4 years.
Yeah, well, you know what? The thing is, it's funny to think that Bill O'Brien finally made a right move, but the problem is he never wanted Deshaun Watson in the first place.
Right.
Back when Bill O'Brien was not the omnipotent dictator within the context of the Houston Texans that he is now, since no one's filled the leadership void left by the late Bob McNair since he passed away. Butchin has just taken over. But before he had completely taken over the whole thing, he was a voice of dissent against Deshaun Watson being drafted in the first place. And so now even he has to admit now, okay, well, the guy's like our whole team on offense now, since I gave away DeAndre Hopkins for David Johnson, who's 85.
And a bag of hockey pucks.
And a second round pick, not even a first.
Yeah.
You're trading away DeAndre Hopkins, and still in his prime, maybe still the most talented receiver in the NFL, and the negotiations start with a first round pick. That's where they start. Okay.
Right.
First round picks on the table. Okay, now we can talk about the rest of the deal. You don't maybe if it's David Johnson from a few years ago and maybe they still think they're getting that, and maybe they are. He still, looks good. I mean, all these beat reporters sing glowing praises about almost every single guy at every single camp, and then they show pictures of these guys who just looked absolutely jacked, and it's like, wow, really? A guy playing in the NFL looks jacked right now? Well, let me just change everything then. Like, they all look like that, unless they're an O-lineman or something that's not supposed to look like that. So it's kind of silly, but yes, 40 million times 4 was the correct thing to do there for Deshaun Watson. He's worth every penny. He's what some people would describe him as a generational talent. Might be. I don't know if he's quite that good, but he might be. Like, I love Deshaun Watson. Seems like a great guy, a great head on his shoulders. And it's just a shame that he has to get killed behind a terrible offensive line that somehow has the highest paid left tackle in the league, Laramie Tunsil, when he doesn't deserve to be. You can throw a lot of money at that O-line. Doesn't mean they're going to be any good. So I do feel bad for Deshaun Watson, too, having to get his head taken off every other play. But, all the best to him and a really nice guy to get paid. A guy that gave his very first NFL paycheck to charity.
That's right.
So, I mean, you can't say anything bad about Deshaun Watson. Gotta love the guy. And actually this morning, I was a ringer for my one buddy's fantasy draft. He's out of cell coverage, out camping or something, and he got me to fill in online as his secret shadow GM doing the work, and they think it's him. And his only request was that he really wanted to, unless I could get Patrick Mahomes, which was impossible in this league, he just really wanted Deshaun Watson because he's his favorite quarterback and just loves the guy, and I can't blame him. And I did get Deshaun Watson for him in the 5th round of the draft today, and hope you enjoy it there, buddy, because Deshaun Watson, real deal.
We've got a bunch of headlines, and I'll get to them, I promise. And I really want to talk about the National Hockey League because they're starting their conference finals play in Edmonton and Toronto. And remember, folks, the Stanley Cup Finals will be played, if it goes to 7 games, will be played in Edmonton. and I want to talk about that. But think about this as you talk about Deshaun Watson now getting his contract extension. And I think it was Mahomes at 10 that year, and it was Watson at 12. And they've both, and that's where I'm going with that. Those two have both signed lucrative extensions here in the offseason.
Lucrative, that's one word for it.
I'm being I'm trying to come up with a word that you would come up with, but my vocabulary isn't as deep and as good as yours.
It's a perfect word for Watson. Mahomes, even I'm not sure what the word is for that.
But, Mahomes is in a class by himself. Yeah. I think he might be the most exciting player to watch right now. Maybe not only in the National Football League, but maybe in professional sports. I don't know if I'm exaggerating that too much, because every time he does something on the field, it seems to amaze us. But I'll get to that a little bit later. What I was getting at with at 10 Mahomes and 12 Watson, the number 2 pick in that draft, and again, we've made mention of this a million times, but it keeps aching to be mentioned again because the Chicago Bears just keep screwing up. And that's fine with me because they're in the same division as the Green Bay Packers. So as long as we have Mitchell Trubisky as a whipping boy, that's always worth a couple of wins on the Packers season total. But the Bears made news late last week that they have decided to go with the former North Carolina one-year wonder Mitchell Trubisky as their starting quarterback. And I think probably the biggest round of applause and the biggest noise about that announcement happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Green Bay, Wisconsin, and Detroit, Michigan, because I really truly believe, and I said this on the program, and I will say it again, why would you send a draft pick? And it was a 4th-round draft pick, but you're still absorbing 3 years left of Nick Foles' contract on your payroll. I thought it would have been a slam dunk, and that's why I guess I'm not as smart or whatever as Ryan Pace, the general manager of the Chicago Bears. But Why would you make a trade for Nick Foles with his proven history? You're bringing on, again, him for 3 more years with his contract. He signed a 4-year contract extension before the start of last season in Jacksonville. Why wouldn't Nick Foles be your quarterback in Chicago? I have no goddamn clue.
Well, Ryan Pace just doesn't know what he's doing. You know, I saw a ranking of the worst GMs from a source I really trust, and they had him, I think, 2nd, and they did have David Caldwell in 1st in Jacksonville, who is really continuing to just make blunder after blunder as well. But Ryan Pace, I really do think deserves to be number 1. He is just a complete disaster. He has no idea what he's doing. He has no foresight. We still remember one of the first things we talked about, I think, 3 years ago, speaking of, on Unscripted, you know, the 3-year deal to Mike Glennon, $15 million a year to be the starting quarterback, and then he doesn't do anything, and no one else was offering him more than 10, and I just went off on him like over and over again on this program. That's probably one of your first memories of me on this program, is like, why would you pay a guy 15 when no one gives him more than 10? Why would you say he's a starter when he's not? Like, and there's just so many problems with this. But getting back to Trubisky, the problem is, and this is the same reason why they drafted him, Mitchell Trubisky is a perfectly fine quarterback in practice.
Yeah.
In practice, he's good. There's a reason he went 2nd overall ahead of Mahomes and Watson. You don't do that when you're terrible, when you're just always terrible in all facets, right? He obviously had the skills enough to do well in a system in college. And I mean, I know that other guys who sucked like Jamarcus Russell and Ryan Leaf did too, but Mitchell Trubisky has some ability. He has the ability to scramble. He needs to do that more, in fact, in games. And if he's just in practice, he knows how to throw a football. You don't get to the NFL level if you can't throw a football. I guarantee Mitchell Trubisky can throw a football a lot further than I can and more accurately than I can, especially when you're just hanging out in the backyard. But in games, he has shown over and over again that he just doesn't have it. Certainly not at the NFL level. If there is one winner of no preseason in the NFL this year, it is Mitchell Trubisky, because that's exactly where he might have been exposed, but he didn't have the chance to be practiced. It's really hard to simulate. And maybe even if they did have a preseason, maybe he still looks okay there against a bunch of scrubs, maybe, right? But in the games, unless he's really made a turnaround, and I don't know, maybe Jared Goff with Sean McVay's coaching is about the only comparable I can think where someone looked like a complete bust as a top pick, and who was 1st overall, in fact. Everyone gave up on him, called him Jared Goof. And he still doesn't look that good behind a bad O-line, but the one year they had the really good O-line and they had McVay coaching him up and Greg Olsen coaching him up, all of a sudden he looked just lights out. Like there were games he just looked like Mahomes. He did whatever he wanted, and was just routinely completing deep bombs for touchdowns. But I don't know. I don't know if Matt Nagy has that ability. He has a reputation as something like that for an offensive mind, maybe. But yeah, Mitchell Trubisky, I can't see this being the right decision. But you're right. I mean, Nick Foles, why would you do that? Nick Foles has had more downs than ups in his career. Just his ups have been so up, but his downs have been really down. Remember his time in Kansas City and the Rams, and he was just useless. At times in Philly until he got coached up by not just a great head coach, but a great quarterback coach as well, or OC, I should say. Same thing as Goff and Trubisky. Man, I just think this is going to blow up in their face again. And the Bears have got to be one of the worst teams in the league this year, really.
Well, think about it this way, and we've got other things to get to, but I think this is something that needs to be said in regard to those three quarterbacks in that draft. Watson played for a national championship while he was at Clemson, and was at least a 3-year starter, maybe a 4-year starter for Dabo Swinney in Clemson, South Carolina. Obviously, Mahomes was a record-setting quarterback at Texas Tech. Never made a national championship game, but at least they went to a bowl game. I think that I have pretty good, at least fair to middling knowledge about college football. And I said this when this first happened. How do you, first of all, trade up one spot from 3 to 2 in the draft?
That was amazing.
That was amazing in and of itself. But then how do you do that and you trade for a guy that has 13 college football starts at North Carolina, and North Carolina was in the middle of they were dog shit. They weren't very good. And again, everything you said, I'm not disagreeing with anything you said, but all I'm saying is, how can you trade up for a guy that has 13 collegiate starts under his belt? He played at North Carolina, which is still a basketball school, and you passed on those two guys at 10 and 12 that have played big-time college football in meaningful big-time college football games, and Trubisky had 13 starts. I just think I am so happy that Ryan Pace is the general manager of the Chicago Bears, because that keeps the Packers relevant. And it may sound selfish, and it may sound a lot of things, but you know what? Go screw yourself. Other headlines. The Lions have brought another running back into the fold, and I think this is a good move for the Lions. I really do. They've got some good backs in Detroit already, but you bring a guy of the ilk and the magnitude of Adrian Peterson, and it only cost you $1.1 million. I think that's a very good move for the Detroit Lions, and that's going to help that running back room there. Another signing that happened, but a lot more than $1.1 million. Jadeveon Clowney signed, I guess, late yesterday, 1 year, up to, with incentives, up to $15 million with the Tennessee Titans. And supposedly, what I heard as late as this morning was that the New Orleans Saints were very close.
Oh, yeah.
And they put in a good offer. But I think, from what I read this morning, that the difference maker was Mike Vrabel and his staff, that he worked previously when he was down in Houston and had his best year as a pro, I believe, in 2017. And that was kind of the kicker. That was the thing that made it happen, getting to play with familiar coaches that brought something extra out of Clowney. Clowney has never put up, in my estimation, he's had a lot of quarterback pressures in his career, but he's never put up big sack numbers. When in 2017, when who's the damn coach? I just mentioned it.
Bill O'Brien, Butchin.
No. When
Mike Vrabel.
Vrabel, right. When Vrabel was his defensive coordinator in Houston, he only had 9.5 sacks. Mm-hmm. So, again, in this day and age, when you've got guys that are going deep in the double digits, 9.5 doesn't seem like a whole heck of a lot.
However, can I say that?
Sure, please.
With that,
you can say whatever the hell you want.
Jadeveon Clowney, I think this is a great signing. And I also, by the way, I love that it's in the AFC South, and he gets to torture potentially the Houston Texans twice a year. Other than poor Deshaun Watson, that's too bad. But other than that, I love seeing Bill O'Brien have to deal with that when he traded him away for no reason because he's a petulant child. But when his exact quote allegedly, Clowney, was he chose familiarity over economics.
Right.
And yeah, the Saints didn't want to take no for an answer. And I don't know how Mickey Loomis continues to do it. Every day he's getting a new guy to restructure his contract. He's a genius. He's a wizard with the cap. Mickey Loomis is the greatest.
I think Mickey Loomis needs to give a little bit of a tutorial to Brian Gutekunst in Green Bay.
Oh, and most of the guys in the league, I think, could learn a thing or two because he's always going after the big names, and he thought that would be a great fit for the Saints, and I agree. And it's just everything. Okay, I'm kind of signing with them. No, well, here's another offer then.
Can you imagine
kept coming back?
Can you imagine how unbelievably talented the New Orleans Saints defensively could have been if they had gotten Clowney to sign on the dotted line?
Yeah, no kidding. But
they could have been a rotational pass switch situation with Davenport and whatever else they got out there. I mean, Jesus, you're absolutely right. I mean, I just can't believe how Mickey keeps pulling this stuff off. And you always see, well, they have minimal cap space. Well, doesn't seem to matter.
No, he figures
doesn't
it
seem
out.
to matter.
No.
I mean, he goes to Drew Brees and, hey, Drew, can we do a little? It's unbelievable, and that's why Mickey Loomis, Howie Roseman. We've said this forever and ever, and amen. It's the same guys we rattle off every time. So you know what we're going to say, and so I'll just shut up.
But, I mean, I feel like Loomis doesn't get the same credit. Like, everyone gives Howie Roseman and Belichick and all these big names a bunch of credit, and I just rarely hear Loomis's name come up. People forget about him.
I think unfairly so, but this is just my opinion, and you can take it for whatever it's worth. But those two other names you mentioned, Howie Roseman and Belichick, they've recently won Super Bowls. For the New Orleans Saints, they haven't won a Super Bowl since 2009, and the last 3 years, they've been unceremoniously dumped in the playoffs.
Yeah, that was,
They really have that first playoff game the last 3 years for the New Orleans Saints has been deadly. The Minneapolis Miracle in 2017. Then the 18, you had the infamous pass interference call between the Saints and the Rams. And then, of course, in 19, what the hell happened when they didn't show up and the Vikings beat them in the Superdome. So I just think there is no excuses anymore. And if Gail Benson, because Tom Benson died, so the wife takes over ownership, and she probably doesn't, the difference between a jockstrap and a helmet, but that's okay. But if they ever decide to let's just say this upcoming season, if we see it all the way to the end, and we'll talk about that later too. But if they see it all the way to the end, and for some reason, and I think a very talented New Orleans Saints team, let's say they go 12-4, and all of a sudden they lose in the first round again, I think the next person to get fired then, because changes would have to be made. 4 years in a row, come on. I think Sean Payton would have to be the target, because Mickey Loomis has done his job. He has supplied Sean Payton, Drew Brees, and everybody else in that great organization with a hell of a lot of good football players. If they get dumped in the first round this year in the playoffs, then I think you've got to make some changes. And it's not Mickey Loomis that needs to go. I think it would be Sean Payton that needs to go.
Well, it'd be Payton more than Loomis if you had to make that decision. But I think both have done a good job. All the last 3 years, everyone will say, "Oh, it's excuses." But you know what? I mean, you get a freak miracle play, and then back-to-back years of blatant non-calls, in my opinion, by the Nickel Roby-Coleman with the blatant interference, and then last year with the push-off. I feel bad for the Saints, really, and I'd like to see them win again. I would not be surprised if they won the Super Bowl this year at all. But sorry, just two last points on Clowney before I get there. Number one, that D-line is going to be scary in Tennessee. You got Landry and you got Jeffrey Simmons there and everything. I think that could be a really scary D-line that nobody wants to play against. And if you screw up, Kevin Byard's back there playing safety. And I just think that there's a lot of potential again for the Titans to have that formula that worked and took them to the AFC Championship game last year with, the ground and pound with Derrick Henry and then the emerging A.J. Brown to throw to and then a great defense. And I think that's great. And the other thing with Jadeveon Clowney, yes, he was drafted first overall in 2014 to be Lawrence Taylor, and he's not that. Nobody is, but he is underrated in his run support. So yes, he doesn't get the double-digit sacks. I think 9.5 is his career high. Yeah, but he's excellent in run support. So it's nice that he can supply the pressure. He's great at supplying pressure. Doesn't get quite as many sacks as they'd like, but then he, I think, makes up for it a bit with incredible, run stopping. And so, Yeah, I think he's a great add there, especially in a division where you're playing against Phillip Rivers and you're playing against Deshaun Watson. I think he's a necessary piece there, and I think this is a brilliant signing, and it was right for the Titans to go all in there for sure. I think that's going to pay dividends for them.
I was going to give Indianapolis the AFC South Division Championship probably without even playing a game this year. I probably have to readjust my thinking there, obviously. But I can tell you one thing. The Jacksonville Jaguars may be the third team in the modern day era to go 0-16. I mean, I know you're not a Leonard Fournette fan, and I know 2 years ago, after that run that they made to the AFC Championship game, and realistically, they could have gone to the Super Bowl if they had done things differently in that fourth quarter, obviously. But Leonard Fournette was the 4th overall pick a couple years ago. They've let him go. Nice pickup by the freaking Buccaneers. Good pickup by the Buccaneers. You don't have to have Fournette play every down, but he can add something to that team, obviously, with the other running backs that they have in the stable down there in Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is loading up for a run here, folks. But does anybody want to play in Jacksonville anymore? And again, the reason I say that is that defensive end, and you know me with names, I'm not even going to try to say this kid's name, but this kid took less money, waived the franchise tag just to get the hell out of Jacksonville for a fresh start and a pay cut to go to Minneapolis and play for the Vikings. So what I'm saying here in regard to a comment that we made a couple minutes ago in regard to David Caldwell, I don't know if David Caldwell is that dumb or he's on orders from somebody else to get rid of this and just get rid of everybody that's... I mean, how can you go into the season as bad as they potentially could be in Jacksonville, and their starting quarterback is a former 6th-round draft pick, and he, Minshew did some good things last year, but then ultimately your backup is a 6th-round draft pick from this season. I mean, I just don't quite understand, and really don't care, but I don't understand what the hell the rationale and the thinking that's going on in the hierarchy of the Jacksonville Jaguars. We both have great respect for their ownership with the Cons, but my God, their football operations look like it's being run like by a high school kid. It's just ridiculous what they're doing to this NFL team.
Yeah, well, this is the most blatant tank job we've seen in a long time in sports, in my opinion, because it's completely over the top, just completely getting rid of guys. And I mean, yeah, like they got a couple of first-rounders for Jalen Ramsey, for example, but I mean, overall, a lot of the stuff has been terrible. And the guy in question you were talking about who went to Minnesota, Yannick Ngakoue.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so here's an example, though, that he's a perfect example of how you can't apologize it away for David Caldwell. He's just proven, at least on that one, that he doesn't know what he's doing, because if you remember, the Oakland Raiders offered the 19th overall pick in this past draft.
That's right.
For him.
Great point. Yeah.
19th overall, and they said, no, we want your 12th overall pick. And they're like, no, that's too much. And like, oh, we're sticking with 19th. Like, should have taken it, because now you get a second for him when you could have had a second you have to wait for a year, which I guess doesn't matter if you're tanking that badly. But I am shocked that the NFL doesn't have a draft lottery like all the other, all the other sports, because I mean, it's such a neat event. I mean, it's a special you can have on TV. It gets ratings. People are excited to see it, and it prevents this blatant tanking. The problem is the Jacksonville Jaguars have decided that they want to tank for Trevor Lawrence out of Clemson. That's what this is. That's all this is.
Absolutely.
And I mean, it's super easy just to give guys away for draft picks, but they're not even doing that well, because when you can get 19th overall and you say, no, we'll take a second later because you played chicken with the Raiders and I mean, Mike Mayock hasn't been as good as people would have expected for such a smart guy, but he completely, stuck to his ground, and they played chicken with him and lost in Jacksonville, and it was too bad, because I feel bad. This team was the joke of the league for a long time. They finally looked like they were doing something. They had the most, not just maybe the best defense a few years ago when they made their run. They had the most exciting defense. Like, they weren't just good at stopping it. They were dynamic. They got interceptions and forced fumbles, and they were fun to watch. And it's not that often you look forward to seeing a defense step on the field purely for the excitement. Like, that's not very often. And that one year, they had that, and it was amazing. And they had all these draft picks that were hitting, and then they all left because the Jacksonville Jaguars, and this is partly Tom Coughlin's fault, who's gone, they accounted for 25% of the grievances by players in the entire NFL. How could one team have a quarter of the grievances by all players? That's unbelievable. Why would you want to play there? You're not going to win anytime soon. It's no fun. Now, I know they got rid of Coughlin, which maybe helps, but man, I mean, this franchise is in complete disarray. The GM needs to go. And it's just a disaster. I mean, other than DJ Chark, the excellent young receiver, who I love in fantasy this year because they're going to have all these games where he just racks up garbage time, much like Blake Bortles and Allen Robinson and Allen Hurns did a few years ago when they were terrible. Other than them racking up stats, other than him, Gardner Minshew, the 6th-round pick, is the most exciting thing on the team and maybe the most competent as well. And that's just ridiculous. This is just completely spitting in the face of the fans as far as I'm concerned. This is a blatant tank job and it's disrespectful and it shouldn't be allowed to work. The fact there isn't a draft lottery just speaks to the unbelievable inaction and lethargy of Roger Goodell, because there's absolutely no excuse for not having a draft lottery. We're going to see one eventually in the NFL. It's just a matter of if he ever gets off his ass and does it, or if we have to wait for the next guy.
This just in, breaking news. Roger Goodell has asked for another pay raise.
Yeah, probably.
Real quick, a couple things that I wanted to get to on this 535th episode of Unscripted, our first episode since late July. Chris posted our last episode, 534, back on July 28th. So due to some holidays and circumstances, we have not been able to get together, but this is our first episode back since the end of July, and we thank you for that as we welcome you to this, not only this episode, but our 4th season of Unscripted. And we had a goal originally of 1,000 episodes. We're more than halfway there. Be interesting to see how long it's going to take us to get to 1,000. This damn jobs thing really just cuts into my golfing time and my unscripted time. I'm kind of surprised by this. I think I'm going to save the National Hockey League until the next episode because I want to really go in depth on that. I'm also going to share with you what I believe is going to be the most unique 2 teams in this most unique of seasons. I think the 2 teams that I've chosen to represent their respective conferences in the upcoming Stanley Cup Finals, I'm going to bet my last $8 that you never would have thought that there would have been franchises in these 2 cities 25 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever it was. Well, Tampa's been around more than 10 years, but it's just unfathomable to me that you could have a Stanley Cup Finals. Now, again, the Stanley Cup Finals this year will be in Edmonton at the beautiful Rogers Place in Edmonton, but in a normal scenario, you would have I believe you're going to have the 2 Stanley Cup finalists from 2 very warm weather cities. That's all. That's a little teaser there. But I just want to really quick before we have to get out of here on this 535th episode. I posed the question to Chris. He's already answered it once earlier today, but I'll pose it again to our fans of Unscripted. As we are speaking right now is Game 4 of the Eastern Conference semifinal series down in the bubble in Orlando between the Milwaukee Bucks and the Miami Heat. And Miami is just totally overplayed. Is that the word? Overplayed or as outplayed? That's the word I'm looking for. God, it's been a month. Has totally outplayed the Milwaukee Bucks. Milwaukee Bucks in the 4th quarter had a 12-point lead on Friday and pissed that away. Giannis hurt his ankle, and there's a lot of circumstances there. But I posed the question, if what a lot of people think is going to happen today, and I don't have the score in front of me right now, they started at 1:30 Mountain Time here today, could this be the last game that Giannis Antetokounmpo suits up for the Milwaukee Bucks? Now, I know he's still got 1 year left on his contract. I also know that as soon as at the conclusion of this season, he could sign that mega max contract with the Bucks, which would be for $258 million. But I'm hearing some rumblings, and I think that this series is going to be a very true telltale sign in regard to what Giannis does next. Miami has figured out a way, obviously. During the regular season, when the Bucks were playing at almost 90%, at one point during the season, they were 53-8, and they were playing at an 89% win percentage. They had a little bit of a stumble there before we had the cancellation, or the postponement of the season back in March. They lost 3 in a row before we went into the shutdown. But they still went into the shutdown at 53-11. Pretty damn good. Since then, Milwaukee's never been the same. But the problem, in my estimation, is the Bucks do not have, and I'm not making excuses. I'm a Bucks fan. We're getting our ass kicked. Miami has exposed us as a fraud. We play in a weak division, in the Central Division, with a bunch of limp dick teams. Detroit, Cleveland, Indiana. They're not good. Indiana's okay, but, I mean, Milwaukee won the division by 20 games. But the problem in Milwaukee is, and I've said this before, we do not have a second banana superstar. We do not have that second guy. And if you're looking at the Lakers, the second guy, guys, from what I've seen, potentially might be LeBron James. And I say that with all due respect to LBJ, but Anthony Davis is one hell of a basketball player. Unbelievable what he can do at almost 7 feet tall. But they've got those two there. You've got Kawhi and Paul George in the other team in LA. In Miami, you've got a bunch of guys, led now by Jimmy Butler. Houston, you've still got, I hate the beard, but you've got the beard and you've got Russell Westbrook. In Boston, you've got Kemba Walker. You've got the kid from Tatum from Duke, Jason Tatum. You've got, there's another, Jaylen Brown. They've got 3 or 4 really good basketball players. Milwaukee's got a good team, but they're not a championship caliber team, because if you throw a roadblock, which Toronto did to him last year after winning the first 2 games, Toronto figured something out. Nick Nurse, coach of the year, figured something out. And if you could stop Giannis and he has to hit jump shots to beat you, Milwaukee isn't going to beat you, because we don't have that second banana star. Chris Middleton sucks. $178 million they gave him. You wish that they could rescind that contract if you're the owner of the Bucks. That's the problem in Milwaukee, folks. We don't have that second banana superstar to pick up the slack when somebody shuts down Giannis Antetokounmpo. And what I'm hearing is that Miami and Toronto are 2 places that Giannis is supposedly interested in playing in. And obviously, Toronto had the bad start in their series against the Boston Celtics, but lo and behold, Nick Nurse makes a couple of adjustments, and all of a sudden it's 2-2 again, and Toronto's right back in it. So I hate to say this, because I have really enjoyed the Milwaukee Bucks being something besides an afterthought in the NBA. Small town. Now, obviously, Milwaukee has come into the forefront in a lot of conversations because of what happened a couple of weeks ago with Jacob Blake in regard to Kenosha, Wisconsin, which is only 40 miles away from Milwaukee. And I think that has hurt the psyche of the Bucks as well. But beyond all of that extracurricular crap, everybody's playing in the bubble. Everybody's been there now over 60 days, which is ridiculous. But it's the only way I think that the NBA could have gone on and completed their season and award a champion, same way in the National Hockey League, is with a bubble. I'll talk about this, and Chris and I will get into a conversation in 5:36 about the National Football League. And they're starting this Thursday, but I'm of the belief that the National Football League will have some delays. I really believe that, and I'll get to that in 5:36. But the Bucks do not have a second banana star, and that's why I'm having a real sickish feeling. Because every time in my 55 years of life, every time Milwaukee was good, they'd get to a certain spot, and then their superstar either wants to leave via free agency or always for a bigger market, or wants to go and get traded. Let's go back to 1975. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar gets traded to the Los Angeles Lakers for 6 players and draft picks. We had a good run in the early 80s, but then Marcus Johnson wants to get traded because he can't stand small-town Milwaukee anymore, and he gets traded to the LA Clippers. Now, and Milwaukee since 86 has been pretty much dog shit, folks. They've been in the NBA Eastern Conference Finals once with big dogs Sam Cassell and Ray Allen. They lose in 7 games to the Philadelphia 76ers, who go on to lose in 2001 to the Los Angeles Lakers. Milwaukee is always right there, but they can't get over the hump. And I'm afraid it's going to happen again. And I think that Giannis is going to take his talents somewhere else. And if Milwaukee's smart, John Horst, the general manager, if you're smart and you get these same feelings inside of you that I have inside of me, I think the biggest and the best thing that he could do would be to trade Giannis to get something before he leaves for nothing.
Yeah, you'd never want to lose Giannis for nothing. That would be a disaster. You just have to have a frank conversation with him and his agent and say, what do you want to do here? And either sign him to a super max or trade him, right? Like, that's it.
Absolutely.
And if you're going to keep him, I would imagine that he would want to know who that second banana will be, because that is the thing to do these days. Do you have a suggestion for who you'd like them to go out and get realistically as a second banana for him?
Well, they need a shooter. I mean, they need a guy. I don't know a guy. I mean, I know a lot of guys, but I'm saying who would be available to the Milwaukee Bucks. I think a lot of guys would jump at the chance to play with Giannis if they knew he was going to be there long term. But Middleton is not the answer. Eric Bledsoe is not the answer. They've got to, I think some of the pieces on their second unit, like Dante DiVincenzo, might need to be upgraded to the first unit next year. You can't come back with Wesley Matthews next year as your two guard. In Milwaukee, we need somebody like, I would love to see, I don't know. I'd have to kind of think about that as to who I think, but we need a guy that can take a jump shot and make a jump shot, whether it's a 2 or a 3. We need a guy that can drive to the hole and take some of the pressure off Giannis. I think there'd be a lot of guys that would be interested in playing in Milwaukee if Giannis is there long term. There's a brand new building, a brand new practice facility. The facilities are second to none. But again, how much is Milwaukee going to be able to pay, because they're limited, being a very small market franchise? And ultimately, this is a team that won 60 games last year, had the first 2 games in the Eastern Conference Finals, and then they pissed it away against the Toronto Raptors, and the Toronto Raptors outcoached, Nick Nurse outcoached Mike Budenholzer last year. And obviously this year, Eric Spoelstra, as the head coach of the Miami Heat, has once again outcoached Coach Bud, because he has made the adjustments. And alternatively, and maybe in fairness to Coach Bud, he doesn't have the personnel to counteract. He doesn't have the personnel to make a difference. But I just really feel that we may be seeing Giannis Antetokounmpo play his last game in a Milwaukee Bucks jersey, and that would be a goddamn shame. But if it does come to that, I think the thing that John Horst has to do, and what management has to do with the Milwaukee Bucks, the ownership group of the Milwaukee Bucks, is that they would have to get on the phone with somebody and make a trade, because you cannot let him, especially as a small market town. If you're the Knicks, you're the Lakers, you're the Dallas Mavericks, you can afford to, I guess, let some guy go because you have the financial wherewithal to make up for that. But ultimately, to answer your question, I'd love to see, all right, I got a name. I would love to see Luka Doncic play in Milwaukee with Giannis Antetokounmpo. But do you think Mark Cuban's going to let him go? Hell no. But if it's a dream, I'd love to see Luka Doncic being in Milwaukee with Giannis. But if this scenario plays out like I see it playing out, where Giannis is frustrated, he doesn't have the horses behind him to help. He's obviously got to be the guy. We all know that, but he doesn't have any secondary scoring. He doesn't have any secondary help. Game one of this series, when they lost to Orlando. Now, they came back and beat Orlando in 5 games, but Orlando sucks. But Middleton went 1 for 14 from the field, and he's supposed to be your second banana and a 2-time All-Star. Oof. I think what you need to do is you need to get on the phone with somebody and make a trade, because, again, as we both just stated, Milwaukee cannot afford, especially as a small market team, cannot afford to let Giannis leave with nothing in return. So that's what I think you really, really have to do. One final thing. We haven't been together in so long that I could just go on and on, but we have time constraints here. Chris has got a life. But I did need to make mention, and this is really because I was thinking of Chris. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers made an important signing today by signing Josh Rosen to their practice squad, and I thought you'd like to know that. I know that's high on, getting Josh Rosen updates are a high priority for you, but let's see. 2 years ago? 2 years ago. 3 years ago.
2018, I think.
So now 3 years ago now. 10th overall pick of the Arizona Cardinals. Spends 1 year in Arizona. His biggest win was the game that he quarterbacked the Arizona Cardinals to a victory in Green Bay, and it cost McCarthy his job. Hallelujah. And the next year gets traded to Miami. Can't break through with Miami. Can't beat out the Harvard man. Yeah.
Well, technically he did. No, he didn't beat.
No, he didn't beat out.
He just Fitzpatrick got benched
right.
for a bit, and
there
then
you go.
They had to bench
because Rosen sucks.
And then Fitzpatrick came back and was very good.
Right. And now Rosen, who still thinks he's got. And remember, I'll never forget this. You wrote this in that unbelievable blog that you wrote years ago, but you had said that Rosen says, "Well, I don't have to work at McDonald's."
Yeah.
You know, something to that effect.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
Fuck you. McDonald's wouldn't take your sorry ass.
Yeah, exactly.
But here's the thing. 3 years ago, 10th overall pick in the draft, Arizona Cardinals future. It didn't work out. 1 year later, he's in Miami. Didn't work out in Miami with a team which we thought was going to be tanking last year. And again, all credit to Brian Flores with the job that he did the second half of the season to make that team respectable. And then now he's on the practice squad in Tampa Bay. I mean, can you fall much farther? I mean, and he might even have trouble, in my estimation, making an XFL or a CFL or what was that, American Legions of Football roster right now, or AAF or whatever the hell it was. I think he'd have trouble making any of those rosters right now because he just hasn't played enough. He hasn't gotten enough reps. No one's going to take a chance on this guy.
No, because he doesn't have that love of football. He doesn't have the heart. And I did think it was funny, though, today on Twitter, somebody was talking about him getting signed to the practice squad and being a quarterback on the Bucs roster. And I said, are you sure he's not an upgrade over a 43-year-old washed-up has-been? Just to see what people would say. So we'll see, because I'm not convinced Brady's anything special anymore. And we still haven't seen him be away from Belichick and away from the familiarity and everything like that. And here he goes, and now he's 43 and he's doing it. I'm not convinced he's going to be any good. He was regressing last year and people didn't notice because they had that great defense. But I'm telling you, I wouldn't count on, and he's got a great supporting cast and great coaching, and I still am not convinced he's going to be anything other than a game manager at best.
Well, but you know what? The thing that and I think his name is Jason Licht or something. The general manager. They have really surrounded him with some weapons. They had great receivers last year. Mm-hmm. They had good tight ends. I don't know if they've improved that with Gronkowski. I'm still anti-Gronkowski, but the running back room is very good in Tampa. Now you have Fournette. You know, you just give him his little coloring book and, give him a couple of specific plays that he can run, a couple of off-tackle runs and stuff like that, and hopefully get to the outside and make something happen on natural ability. But even if Tampa Bay doesn't play very well, they still should be competitive, even though they're playing in a very difficult division that has a guy by the name of Drew Brees in it. So interesting times in Tampa Bay, but I think it's officially time to put a fork in Josh Rosen. I think he's done.
Yeah, for sure it is. And we might be saying the same thing about Tom Brady because, as you just said, if Tom doesn't do a good job, he has absolutely no excuse whatsoever.
Right, absolutely. We've got to run. In our other episode this week, we want to take a cursory look at week number 1 of the National Football League. I want to take an in-depth look at the upcoming conference finals in the National Hockey League. 2 teams in Edmonton, 2 teams in Toronto. Really looking forward to that. And some really exciting, I think, really good hockey teams that are left. Well-coached hockey teams. And that's my shout-out to Barry Trotz, man. What a difference he makes for the New York Islanders.
By the way, that reminds me. I think it was Sid Sixero last night on Twitter posted that. Number of playoff series won by the Maple Leafs and the Islanders since the John Tavares acquisition. Maple Leafs 0. Islanders 4 and counting.
And counting, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What can you say? Barry Trotz.
Hey, listen, if there's a team out there, and obviously we saw this last year with what Tortorella and the Blue Jackets did in round 1, taking down a team that won 62 regular season games. It can happen. But when you've got Barry Trotz on your bench, don't take anything for granted, folks. And correct me if I'm wrong, I could be wrong here, but in Game 7 of the Philly series, Barry Trotz played a hunch and put in the other goaltender And look what had happened. They made it to they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time since 1993. So I love Barry Trotz. I think he's the best coach in the National Hockey League. And I think just with him on your bench, that's worth a win or two in a 7-game series.
Absolutely, yeah. Barry Trotz, just so consistent. Never should have been let go from Nashville or Washington.
Right.
Yeah, he should literally still be coaching. He should still be the only coach in Nashville Predators history approaching a quarter century. There is what should still be going on.
Yeah.
Getting rid of Barry Trotz is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard of, and he continues to amaze with a team that wasn't even supposed to be any good, even with Tavares. And they get rid of Tavares, and then they're better without. The guy's unbelievable, and I don't care what happens in his career, he needs to be in the Hall of Fame.
No question.
He's the best.
No question. And it'd also be interesting to see what Pimple Boy, that's my new name for the general manager, Kyle Dubas in Toronto, what Pimple Boy does to reshape his roster. This is a team that's tearing it up in the regular season, but they get to the postseason and they can't squat flies. They can't do nothing. They're just, and I have no problem with it because it's the GTA. I could give a shit.
Speaking of interesting GM hires potentially, did you hear that Pierre McGuire got interviewed for the Coyotes job?
Yes, I did hear that.
I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And, you never know how it's going to work because these guys are so brilliant, as analysts. And I've been kind of disappointed at Mike Mayock in Vegas. He hasn't seemed like, he's so brilliant. And of all things, especially he's covering the draft. And you see him in all these draft broadcasts, and he's unbelievable. And he takes Clellan Ferrell, 4th overall for no reason. And then you see him, it's like when they get to the big stage, they just, freak out and get stage fright or something.
I don't think Mayock has done that bad. I mean, I agree with you in some, obviously. There are some questionable ones. There are some questionable ones, but I would think that Mike Mayock and, again, my favorite whipping boy in Green Bay, Brian Gutekunst, could have a conversation in regard to how to acquire a wide receiver, though. I love the wide receiver room with the Las Vegas Raiders. I don't like the wide receiver room for the Green Bay Packers.
But in fairness, Tyrell Williams now is out for the year, I think.
Yeah.
And so they've got Hunter Renfrow, who was great for 2 games last year in the slot, but they're probably putting Ruggs there. And they drafted Ruggs over Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb, who are both on the board. All wide receivers were on the board.
That's true. Good point.
And they went with their own version of Mecole Hardman, who, twice a year looks amazing. Right. And then the rest of the time, they don't give him any targets because they're more of a gadget guy. They should have gone with Jeudy or CeeDee Lamb, in my opinion, there. We'll see if they can make Ruggs the real deal. He's just a speed burner. But these scouts and these coaches and these guys and these GMs, they overplay the combine. They get excited about, he ran a 4.3 instead of a 4.4, so now we have to draft him over guys that are legitimate, potentially number 1 wide receivers in the league, and it's silly. And Pierre McGuire, I'm rooting for him. I like when the smart, intelligent guys who know their stuff and love the game get their shot there. So, I mean, if he does get hired, assuming... it would be interesting.
The guy that was in there, and I know we're long.
John Chayka.
Right. Was there a communication breakdown, or what do you think happened there? Because I thought he was one of the brilliant young minds in the National Hockey League.
Well, yeah, I mean, years ago, you never would have, it doesn't matter what the guy was, you never would have hired a 26-year-old to be the GM.
Right.
And but I mean, there was no such thing as advanced analytics that many years ago. And when you get a young hotshot who has his own analytics firm, he was very smart. He was very good. I liked a lot of the stuff he did. I don't know exactly what the problem was, but it wasn't handled that great by his bosses, because there was a meeting they were having with a player, I think, and they literally just didn't invite him to be in the meeting. And it's like, okay, no, he's the GM. Right. Either you fire him or he's part of the meeting. That's it. Right. So I was disappointed in that handling there. So I tend to blame management more than him. They were unprofessional. So I don't know. I think now he was a 26-year-old GM now he's got like 5 years experience as a GM, and he's in his early 30s.
He'll go somewhere else.
He'll get a job somewhere else for sure. I thought he did really well. And keep in mind, they have a severe internal cap, and and no fans, and they have all these restrictions. And I thought he did quite a good job. So I think he'll get a chance somewhere else. But yeah, I'd be very interested. If there was one guy I'd be interested to see get a job as an NHL GM, to see how he would do. It is Pierre McGuire, him or Ray Ferraro, actually, but maybe even McGuire even more so. So I hope they do hire him, and I would like to see what he can do.
We've got to run on this 535th episode of Unscripted. A lot of things to get to in our follow-up episode after this one, so I better shut up and put the wraps on this one. But again, we've been gone since July the 28th, so we've got a lot of catching up to do. I haven't seen Chris since July 28th, so it's good to see him as well. Having said all that, we've got to run. For the executive, I forgot even how to sign off. It's been so goddamn long. For the executive producer of Unscripted with Mike and Chris, Mr. Chris Fluke, I'm Mike Jansen. Until next time.